Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I'm going to make you very, very angry, I think. In fact, I might even make your blood boil, I would imagine, because I'm going to talk about government waste and incompetence and how we are all paying for it at a time when we simply can't afford it. Now, we all know that prices are going up. Prices of everything are going up. We see the price of food, the price of petrol. We see gas, electricity, and taxes are going up. Local authority council taxes are going up, and national insurance is going up as well. So everybody is being squeezed. We all have less and less disposable income by the time we paid all these increases in prices. And that, of course, will have a serious effect on the economy because there's much less money floating around for incidental purchases and so on, and a lot of businesses are going to suffer. Now, a lot of these things are as a result of circumstances beyond our control, such as petrol and so on. A lot would say it's gas and electricity and water and so on is also beyond our control, and indeed it is to a certain extent. And the reason for this is that we've sold off all our utilities. The vast majority of electricity, gas, water and rail have been sold to foreigners. Last week, a consortium or a partnership of two companies, one from Australia and one from Canada, bought 60% of our gas infrastructure. That's all the pipes and all the meters. They now belong to a firm based in Sydney and another one based in, or 60% of it of them belong to a company based in Sydney and another one based in Victoria, British Columbia. Now the Australian company is called Macquarie Asset Management and the Canadian company is called British Columbia Investment Management. Now, the clue's in the name: investment management, asset management. They buy these companies to make money. They're not interested in whether or not we've got good gas infrastructure. They're not interested in improving things and maintaining things to a very high standard. All they're interested in is making money. Now, the government says whenever these companies come and buy all these utilities, they're showing confidence in the British economy, investing in the British economy. They're coming here to make money. Macquarie Asset Management, for example, they own Southern Water. Previously, they owned Thames Water. They had it for about 10 years. During that time, they took loads of money out of it and they left it with huge debts. And shortly after, they sold it to somebody else, another foreign company. They then, Thames Water got a huge lawsuit about dumping sewage in rivers. Nowadays, of course, because we've left the EU, we can dump as much sewage as we like in rivers, and that's what the water companies are doing because it's cheaper and it's more profitable. So all these utilities have been sold to foreigners who just want to make money out of us. And if they can put prices up, they'll put prices up. And so they put prices up. And we all pay for it. Now, our exports to the EU are down 12% since Brexit. Now, this video is not about Brexit, but Shiny Rishi Sunak appeared before the Treasury Select Committee last week, and he was asked about this. He was said, look, exports to the EU are down 12%. And he said, I'll tell you exactly what he said. These are the words he used. He said, it was always inevitable that there would be a change in our trade intensity with Europe as a result of a change in the trading relationship. That was expected and unsurprising. Now, I don't remember him saying that during the referendum campaigns. I don't remember anyone saying it was expected that our exports to the EU would collapse as a result of Brexit. And this just adds to everything else, because if our exports are down 12%, half our exports previously were going to the EU. So that means that our total exports are down. If we maintain the same level of exports to other non-EU countries, our total amount of exports are down 6%. Now, 6% is a further hit to the economy. That is more business. That's more taxes, more employment. And so, under this government, we've got into a real mess. We've sold off our utilities. Brexit has been so damaging to the economy, and it's only just beginning. We're just beginning to see the damage that Brexit is going to do to the economy as a whole. But I wanted to talk about a guy called Lord Agnew. Now, he was the Minister of State for Efficiency and Transformation. That was his title. He was a sort of an odd job. He did this and a bit of that. Part of the time he was finding transformers, and part of the time he was doing business, bounce back business loans. Now, he appeared before the Treasury Select Committee as well on a different sitting a week or so ago. And he was asked about why he had resigned in January. He resigned his job, and he said he resigned it because he was so exasperated with how so much was being written off in terms of bounce back loans. Now, the bounce back loans, the government decided once the pandemic hit that they had to help businesses. And so what they decided to do was offer loans to companies to get them through. And what they did, they set up this scheme whereby I think the business, I don't know what it's called these days, business enterprise and whatever it is, Quasi-Kwarteng's department. They seem to change the name every 6 months. But anyway, his department supervised this. And then what they did was they gave the banks plenty of money to lend, and they just said, lend money to all these businesses. And so the banks lend, and the government told them that, don't worry about it, we will guarantee any loans. They weren't asked to do any checks. So what you had to do if you wanted one of these business loans, you had to go on the website, very, very simple. You had to put in the name of your company, and then you had to say how much business you'd done last year, your turnover, and the name and address of your bank, and then you would automatically get 20% of your previous year's turnover as a loan. And that was all there was to it. No checking whatsoever. Well, of course, for the banks, this is terrific. They're legally lend money right, left and centre to anybody. And for anybody who was at least the least bit dishonest, this was money for nothing. And you got the money instantly. All you had to just go online and fill it in. If you hadn't got a company, you could form a company. Now, 1,000 companies that applied for these loans didn't exist anymore. They'd been dissolved. 1,500 companies that applied for these loans had just been set up when they heard about the scheme. And so they just put anything in for the last year's turnover. And so 47 billion was lent to all these people. Banks couldn't care less because they're going to get it back anyway, and they're getting a fee for doing it, for lending it. And suddenly they find that people aren't paying back, or people are disappearing. They find out that people have got loans and spent them on cars, on holidays, buying properties abroad, all sorts, because it's free money. And as long as you covered your tracks, you just disappear afterwards. And so Lord Agnew, he decided that he had enough of this, and he resigned in protest. And he was quizzed about this at the Treasury Select Committee. And I just want to read you one or two of the things he had to say about it. He described it as a dad's army. He said the whole thing was a joke. No basic checks were done, and that at the time that he left, there was something like 4.9 billion being written off as uncollectible. And he was asked, why would you give a grant to a company that hadn't even existed before? He said he had no idea. And what he said a lot of the banks did is they had a customer with an overdraft, maybe an overdraft of £50,000, and so they go and borrow a business bounce back loan, get the £50,000. The bank said to them, why don't you pay off your overdraft? Because you're guaranteeing your overdraft, get rid of that. No guarantee. Nobody's guaranteeing the business buyback loan. And so a lot of people apparently did that. One of the members of the committee, a lady called Siobhan McDonough, a Labour MP, she said, I had an email from a constituent who told me that she had a childcare business, got a bounce back loan and built an extension on her house. She thought it was very unfair that the bank was now asking her to make instalments to pay it back. A couple of guys were caught, down at Portsmouth, and they were on their way to Europe, and they were found to have a suitcase full of money. And when whoever was stopped them and said, where's this money come from? They said, oh, it's our bounce back loan. We're going to Portugal to buy a house. And so this thing was so loose, no checks, give away money, banks couldn't lose. It was the maddest scheme. And billions and billions are being written off because of it. And just a couple of other things that Lord Agnew said to the committee. He said in the year before COVID, the government spent 1.8 billion, 1,800 million on consultants. And he said, apart from the appalling waste of money, he said, the civil service, there are plenty of bright, well-educated, clever people who work there. But whenever there's a problem, you get a consultant. You pay them 3 times as much money, and then you can say, the consultants told us to do this, and you're free. Now, when Kwasi Kwarteng's department was asked about, by Lord Agnew, he was asked about these loans and which banks had given out the most duff loans and so on. They replied, this is public money, this is the business department. We're unable to disclose the rates of indicators of suspected fraud by individual lenders, as this would be commercially sensitive. So, Business Secretary's department is protecting all these people who've thrown money right, left and centre without even worrying about it. There's a guy I tell you about, he was written about in Private Eye a couple of weeks ago, but he's been written about in the last 2 editions. A guy who's just a regular fraudster, has been doing fraud all along for years and years and years. And he opened up some sweet shops called Kingdom of Sweets. There's one in Oxford Street, there's one in Piccadilly. They're all over the country. He's got one in Amsterdam, I think, one somewhere else in Germany. Got about a dozen, 15 of these Kingdom of Sweets shops. And he formed 21 companies. And although only some of these companies have now submitted accounts, when you put your accounts in, you've got to show your balance sheet and so on. And most of these companies have got a loan of £50,000. That's all they got on there, a loan of £50,000 payable after 1 year. In other words, they've all got these business buyback loans. So this guy has raised all this money, maybe 20 different companies apply for loans, got £1 million, set up a whole chain of sweet shops. There was nothing to stop him doing that. No checks whatsoever. And so through this sort of sloppiness, there's these billions. It could well be a lot more. It's 4.9 billion at the moment. It could be a lot more. It is just written off. Now that's your money. It's my money. And if you think about it, there are going to be people, thousands and thousands of people, who are really going to have trouble paying their rent, paying the electricity, or buying their children's clothes, or probably living off food banks. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And all this money the government just throws away. And they're totally unaccountable. No one can say who's responsible for this or do anything about it. Now, I made a video some time ago about PPE, and I just wanted to mention something because something cropped up in the last week or so. There's a lady called Michelle Mone, and she started some sort of underwear company. And anyway, she got to know David Cameron, and next thing she's in the House of Lords next door to, sitting next to Lord Lebedev and the cricketer and a few other people, and the Prime Minister's brother. So she's in the House of Lords, Baroness Mone. Now she saw an opportunity with PPE. So she privately emailed Michael Gove. Apparently she emailed him from a private plane, apparently. Anyway, and she also emailed her friend, who happens to be the guy we were just talking about, Lord Agnew, and said, can I have a PPE contract and so on. She said that her team in Hong Kong would be able to find all this PPE really efficiently and all the rest of it. And she was a bit pushy, but it was all done in private email. And in due course, she got a contract. She got a contract for £122 million. No previous experience of dealing with PPE whatsoever. She said she had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. Now, her team in Hong Kong were probably Alibaba, I don't know. At the time of all this panic to get PPE, and all these amateur firms, friends of ministers and so on, getting in on it, they would all have looked on Alibaba, and they'd have found a company, and they'd have contacted the company and said, I want so many million of this and so many million of that. And the Chinese companies would have looked at it, and they would all have said, well, this is a chance to get rid of a bit of duff stock. We're not going to worry about this customer. They're never coming back again. It's a one-off. We're going to get paid in advance, so send them anything. So there was really very little control of stuff that came in, which is why there's so much waste, which I'll go on to mention in a moment. So anyway, she got this contract for £122 million, and then she got some guy they know in southeast England to order this stuff for them. Incidentally, the company that actually did the business on behalf of Moan it's called PPE MedPro, and it's got a sole director, and he happens to be employed by Michelle Bone's husband, a guy called Doug Barrymore. So anyway, they bought this stuff, and it cost them 46 million. So on that one deal, they made 76 million pounds profit. Now, to be absolutely fair, because I don't want to malign them, there would have been at least £500,000, or probably about £500,000 in expenses, shipping and all the rest of it. So they only made 75.5 million between them on this one deal. Now, it turned out, unfortunately, this stuff was useless. Once they paid for it, the Department of Health found out they couldn't use it. So it's all having to be destroyed. They've asked for the money back, but they don't want to give it back. Michelle and her husband and the guy who runs PPE Metro, they don't want to give the money back, so they probably won't have to. And there's so many cases like this. Patel, the Home Secretary, she had some friend of a friend or something who'd had some sort of medical supplies company. At least it was something to do with medical supplies. She emailed Michael Gove and could he get a contract, and then she started. I think Gove emailed Hancock. It was done on private emails again, Hancock, and then Patel started writing to Hancock saying, "Can you please get the contract for these people?" They got the contract, and when the civil servants had a look at it, they said, "Look, the price they're charging us is double our guide price." Nonetheless, it went through, and they got the supplies. That was 115 million in that case. So at least half of that would have been profit. So there'd be more. So people were making more than 50% profit on these huge contracts. And so much of it was done so badly with so little control that billions and billions have had to be written off. The Department of Health, their official estimate of their losses on PPE is £20 billion, 20,000 million. Billions of it unusable, billions of it overpriced, billions of it out of date. And it's costing them £7 million a week to store all this stuff. And they're gradually getting rid of it by having it incinerated. They're burning it. So this is £20 billion thrown away because they used amateurs, because nobody thought to use a professional. The whole of the NHS is supplied by professionals who could have supplied PPE very easily and had contacts and had supervision in China that could have checked everything. But they didn't want to use them because they prefer to use their friends. And thousands of companies applied to supply PPE who could well have supplied it very efficiently, but no, most of them were turned away. It was all given to friends, so the money stayed in-house, so to speak. And then you've got, I know I've mentioned this a lot of times before, and people lost interest. Test and trace. In this country we've got lots of really, really fantastic businesses. Some really clever people running these businesses. We've got some really clever academics and clever managers, all sorts of really clever people. And so we decide to set up a test and trace. And who do we get to run it? The wife of a Tory MP. The Tory MP happens to be the anti-corruption SOAR in the midst of all this massive corruption. And she's given a budget of £37,000 million. Now, I know you say £37,000 million, 37 billion, everybody says, oh yes, it's just a number. To put this in perspective, there's a building in London, if anyone lives in London or has visited London recently, they'll have seen it. It's called the Shard. It's a huge building, 72 floors high. Fabulous building, all sort of top quality materials, fantastic. And that cost £500 million to build. So for what was budgeted, it wasn't all spent, maybe about half of it. Nobody knows how much was spent, probably about half of it was spent. for what was budgeted for this test and trace, which didn't work, and which Dido Hardy admits didn't work because it wasn't expected to work on its own, you could build 75 of those buildings. We launched a fantastic, absolutely top-range aircraft carrier a couple of years ago. $3 billion it cost. You could buy 12 of them for what was budgeted for a test and trace that didn't work. You could have 17 missions to Mars for the cost of test and trace that didn't work. And how come nobody said, what are you going to do with this money? Nobody knows where it went, except that thousands and thousands and thousands of consultants were employed. £1,000 to £6,000 a day. These big people like Serco and Deloitte's and all these big accountancy companies making millions and millions and millions of public money. And there are people at food banks, and there are going to be a lot more people at food banks. And if you look at all these, just these three things I've mentioned, it's something like 40. If you take that test and trace they only spent half the money, 20 billion, plus the waste in PPE, plus the waste in giving away all these loans without checking anything, you got to get on 40 billion, 40,000 million. Sunak in his spring statement the other day made a big thing. It was kind of the crowning of the cherry on the top of it at the end. He said he was going to knock a penny off income tax just before the next election to get elected. That would cost 6 billion. And I've just described how the government has thrown away 40 billion. But what I find so disappointing is why everybody accepts, or so many people accept all this. Everybody just says, it's all in the past. What's done is done. Let's move on. And you get you've got the propaganda department in the Joseph Goebbels department in Downing Street, pumping out a new, WhatsApping all the ministers with a new catchphrase each week. This week it's been Boris Johnson is leading the world in the fight against Russia in Ukraine. He's leading the world. You saw how they were all gathering around him to see if he was leading the world when he went to the NATO meeting a couple of weeks ago. The week before that, it was what was the 1 week before that? It was it the fastest growing economy in the G7? No, I know what it was. It was he got all the big decisions right. Small ones, not sure about that, but all the big decisions he's got right. Like what? Build Back Better and getting Brexit done and so on. It's just propaganda, and people remember it and they forget all this other stuff. It doesn't really matter. But if only somehow people could link the financial stress and difficulties they're going to suffer and are suffering already with the fact that it's government mismanagement responsible for a lot of it. They will blame everything. They'll blame the pandemic, and they'll blame the EU, and they'll blame the invasion of Ukraine. They'll blame everything. Everybody will be responsible apart from the government. And as I say, I don't understand why people don't protest more. And I sometimes wish they were a bit more like the French and a bit more. A bit readier to go out and protest and to make a fuss. I remember when Lord Gormless did his amazing withdrawal agreement deal and sorted out fishing, sorted out fishing to satisfy all the fishermen who'd all voted for Brexit, of course, and who then suddenly found out that they couldn't sell their fish in Europe anymore because of paperwork. So they got the waters back, they could fish in their waters, but they couldn't sell the fish they caught. And I think I seem to remember that a whole load of them got in their lorries and they drove down from Scotland or Grimsby or wherever, and they drove down. They drove down to London and they just drove around a bit and they went back again. Spent thousands on diesel, I've no doubt. Why didn't they load each of those lorries they came down with half a ton of rotting fish and just tip it in Whitehall, tip it in front of Parliament? That would have been all over the world in newspapers. And something would have done about it because the government would have to respond. And with the farmers, the farmers are really having a tough time in this Australian, New Zealand deals. They're going to make it much, much worse. Why are they not blocking all the motorways? Just drive with 3 tractors, 3 abreast down the motorway and have them all break down. You'd have a 20-mile queue. You'd have the helicopters up, photographs of it. Every newspaper will be showing it. As happens when the French do it. But no, well, it's, I can't really do anything about it. Okay, the economy's going, the government's making a mess of it, the economy's going to the dogs. But, well, what's on Netflix? And I'm disappointed that people don't want to put up more of a fight, really. We know we're losing so many of our really basic civil rights, right to protest and all the rest of it. And well, there's a guy, wasn't it, Lemaistre, a Frenchman, who said that a nation gets the government it deserves. And I sometimes think that. I saw a couple of clips of I saw a news item on Channel 4 News a few nights ago where they interviewed a guy up in Yorkshire, I think, one of the Red Wall seats, who had a card shop, and they also interviewed a lady with a hairdressing shop, and they all thought, well, on the balance, he's doing all right, he's getting the big things right, and the past is the past, and we've just got to move on and make the best of it. I say, sod it, I make the best of it. Complain. Anyway, I'm just one voice, and what can I do? If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed. I'm very grateful, and if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, I'd be very grateful. And I hope your blood's not boiling too much. Until next time, bye for now.